I'm Brian. I thought I would give you just a little sense of my background and career, and then kind of talk about this moment that the insurance industry is in and what that means for opportunity, and why it's so important. And, it's interesting when Jim said like 25% of folks in the industry are retiring within 5 years. I kind of live in the claim space, and we have a much scarier stat where, depending who you ask and where the data is coming from, it's somewhere between 40% and two-thirds of the experts in the space are retiring within 5 years. So even more pressure for new, exciting people to come in. So really quickly, or as quickly as I can, on my background, I got into insurance by accident, which is kind of how everybody whose parents weren't agents ends up getting into insurance. No one often is like, from birth, that's what I want to go do. But so many of us find ourselves in this industry by accident, by chance, because we got exposed to something, we tried something, and actually we're really interested. And that's my story as well. Um, I wanted to do management consulting coming out of undergrad. Liberty Mutual had a consulting team, and I went for a job there. And I like solving problems and I like making things better. And there was a lot of opportunity to do that. So that started me down this whole path in insurance. And here I am 25 years later, still working in the space. I've done a lot of really cool things in different geographies and areas of the business and functions. Worked my way up through the ranks and ended up doing consulting work at a company called McKinsey for a while for other insurance companies. Got my master's, and then went back into insurance companies. And I ended up being the COO of a British carrier's US business, and then the chief claims officer of one of our competitors. Again, another British carrier's, British insurance company's US business, which was amazing, like amazing experiences. Um, I ended up leaving for a tech company, an insurtech, so insurance and technology, a company I was an early customer of as they were growing. And I thought, try the startup scene and see if I can help make a difference in trying to change and evolve the industry. And it was completely different from what I was used to, but pretty amazing and a really cool kind of perspective from the other side of the coin. Much smaller organization, but also trying to help change an industry that is not really known for change. And not just talking about it, but actually creating something that could be different. And that was really exciting. Um, I left to start helping others in the industry kind of go through change and do advisory work and consulting and a lot of thought leadership. So I've been putting out book series and podcast and getting involved with the GIA and others to just try to help kind of spark the change in the industry. There's a reason for that. And, insurance is like the butt of jokes sometimes. It's like, oh, it sounds boring. Um, it can be, and I see why people would say that, but if you really stop and think about it, it's unbelievably important. Nothing in the world happens without insurance behind it. And that's something I didn't fully grasp. We talk a lot in the industry about putting lives back together or standing by people in these really difficult moments. And that's very true. I said I'm a claims person, like that's the space I live in. A tree falls through your house, you get in a car accident, like we're supposed to be there for you and make things better. And that's super important. But, with those of you with a finance background, like no trade happens, no business happens without risk being taken off the table so it can move ahead. Goods aren't produced and shipped. People don't, do whatever financial transactions, buying companies, engaging in contracts, any of that stuff. You can't hire a lawyer, go see a doctor, open a bank account. No, nothing really happens without insurance behind it. And if you stop and think about that, you start to realize how critical it is for the world. It's not often thought about it this way, but it's sort of this engine, or at least the mechanism by which the world gets to function, because we don't have to stop because risk makes everything impossible. And that's a really it's not that putting lives back together isn't an amazing purpose and a great reason to get up every day. But if you think about this fundamental notion that like nothing would happen in the world without it, then you start to feel an even greater reason why, not just to pursue a career, but maybe even to engage in how to make things better or different, because the stakes are so high and the need for it is so profound. Um, there are lots of difficult things going on in the world. Politics, war, inflation, like take your pick. Obviously, coming out of a pandemic, like there's so many difficult things, and insurance is not immune to any of those things. We face difficult things as well. If you, if you read the news, is pretty much every week there's a, or at least every month, there's a different insurance company that is pulling out of a state. A lot of insurers earlier last year pulled out of California for homeowners because it's too unprofitable for them. There's layoffs. There's all these difficulties that insurers are facing. And you can say, well, that, too bad for them. Or maybe that's why that's not an industry I'm interested in. But I think it's actually the opposite. What that is the difficult things going on in the world are playing out for insurers as well. They're subject to climate change and inflation and litigation and all the other things that, everyone deals with every day in this country and abroad, and need to figure out how to navigate that. And if you go back to that kind of purpose of like nothing in the world happens without insurance behind it, you start to see why we actually have to figure this stuff out. We can't just pull out of every market that we can't figure out how to make money in, because then we're not left covering anything. And then, in California, if you can't get homeowners insurance, that means you can't get a mortgage, which means for almost everybody, you can't buy a house, or you lose the house that you have because you no longer can afford insurance and your mortgage says you have to have insurance. So then what do you do? That, I mean, I think you start to see like that's actually a major problem. Florida's in the same boat. People are paying tens of thousands of dollars for homeowners insurance. That's not feasible. And yet companies are still losing money selling it. So like it's too expensive to sell something that would be profitable to sell, and it's unprofitable to sell something that would be possible to buy. That's kind of like an impossibility. We have to solve for these things. And that's where I think it's a really interesting and unique moment for insurance. We've had tools at our disposal to kind of tweak things along over the years, deal with ups and downs, and that's worked pretty fine. I don't say fine as like an amazing way. It's like it's worked okay. But a lot of those things are running out of steam, or the issues that we're facing have reached a level of severity that little tweaks here and there aren't good enough. If you have wildfires taking over a huge swath of the country, if you have tornadoes hitting with much more frequency, a little tweak to your rate here or there, charging people a few dollars more, that's not going to change the game if you're spending billions and billions to try to repair the damage that's caused by these things. And this is this interesting moment where I think it's time for some more fundamental changes to the industry. And you guys can imagine, like, fundamental change is not an easy thing for people who've been in a space to make. So really interesting time for outside thinking, outside ideas, or people who can take a fresh approach to things to come in. And couple of examples from the GIA that I would share. And one is I mentioned Sola. So Sola has a product right now. It's called parametric insurance. So it's normally, you get in a car accident, someone has to look at your car, maybe do it with an app, but they have to see the damage, they have to size it up, figure out what it's going to cost, and either repair your car or pay you for the car that's totaled that can't be repaired. Same thing with a home, hail hits your roof, there's a certain amount of damage done, you got to size that up, figure out what it costs to repair, and pay for it. Parametric insurance doesn't bother with any of that. It looks at some factual thing that can be verified, and you either met their criteria or you didn't. So, for example, I live in Boston. We had this record snowfall year in the winter of 2014 and 2015. The city of Boston took out a parametric insurance policy for snow plowing. So if we had so many inches of snow as measured in this, like on the runway of Logan Airport here in Boston, then the cumulative snow amount, if it reached, I think it was 100 inches, if it reached 100 inches, then they would get this automatic payout at a predetermined amount to bolster the city's funds for snow plowing. And we had over 100 inches that year. I forget, it was like 118 or something. So they got like millions of dollars. No one had to come out and say like, well, how many inches and how many dollars per inch? It was just a prefixed thing. So Sola has done that with tornadoes. So if you live within, like, the National Weather Service draws this path for a tornado after it strikes within about 24 to 36 hours. If you live within that path, depending on the strength of the tornado, if you had a policy from Sola, they just pay you. You just automatically get money sent to your bank account. You get a text to ask if you need it, because they actually do have to verify that, like, yes, this is legitimate. But if you text back yes, just hits your bank account. And they recently paid their first two claims. They had people, there was a tornado in Tennessee. People who were their customers were in the pathway and they got a payout. And it's not like enough money to buy a new house, but those people have homeowners insurance. What Sola did is it sort of comes in and it's very fast. So you don't have to wait for someone to come look at your house and size it up and get a contractor out and any of that. It's like, I think they paid within 60 hours of the tornado striking. So that's really quick. Um, and it's a smaller amount of money, but it's enough to kind of bridge the gap while you wait for your bigger homeowner's claim to get handled. So it's like 1,500 to I think $15,000, depending on the strength of the storm, something like that. Maybe it's 10,000. But if you guys know what a deductible is, that's like you get in a car accident, you have to pay the first some amount of money, and then the insurance steps in. Well, this could cover your deductible. And for 2/3 of Americans, they don't even have $1,000 in the bank. I don't know how many people in the room, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands, but I'm sure a lot of you are like, yeah, I don't have $1,000 in the bank. Or if I do, I couldn't really part with it that easily. Like I would feel that. So having something that is relatively inexpensive to buy, it's under $100, that would step in and just pay you automatically really quickly while you're just trying to figure out, like, we just got hit by a tornado. I don't know where my kids are going to sleep or how I'm going to, sleep somewhere safe and go to work the next day or get food, or we don't have electricity or food all spoiled. Like all of these questions, you just have cash to deal with the immediate needs while you figure out the bigger picture. And that's pretty transformational. If we look at what's going on with the cost of homeowners insurance, for example, a lot of it is driven by things like tornadoes. Hail is actually the biggest issue in homeowners right now because it comes in and just destroys like every roof in a city and then leaves. And so you get tons and tons of homeowners claims. That's actually making it impossible for homeowners to offer insurance. So some of the companies I work with, they cannot write another home in certain jurisdictions. They're maxed out because they have too much hail exposure. Well, Sola is working on a product that could look at the hail that's coming down in an area and automatically pay out based on the size of the hail and if you were in the area where it hit, and you just get paid. What that could allow is for a homeowner's insurer who can't afford to sell you a policy because of that hail exposure to take the hail exposure out. So to say, like, we're not going to cover you for hail, but you can buy this thing from Sola that will, and we'll cover everything else. And then you can actually get homeowners insurance that you could afford or you're allowed to buy because we're willing to sell it to you. So you've got this conundrum right now where like you couldn't buy the product if you wanted to or needed to. And if you could, you couldn't afford it. Is there another way of addressing the risks that that you're facing that would still allow you to get coverage? And that's, for me, that's a really interesting thing. That's like rethinking the product completely. That's not just like, well, what if we charge a little bit more or give them a little bit less? It's a totally different way of thinking about what the product is. And that took someone from the outside, different perspective coming in and pushing on it. So I think that's super fascinating. And yeah, if you're interested, like check out the podcast with Wesley, the founder. Just a great guy, and you can see like why did he do this? Why did he feel like it was something he had to do? And hopefully it's a little bit of inspiration. And like I said, like he was 19 when he started the company, which is pretty wild. The other one I mentioned is right now in the GIA. It's a company called Cybercade, and I think some of the folks in the room might be getting a chance to work with them. It's a way for, like, it's the word cyber for cyber insurance, like getting hacked, getting your data stolen, and like put out in the dark web, data breaches, that kind of stuff, with the word arcade. So they use digital gaming to teach people about better cyber behavior and to also assess how risky that individual is. So if you're an employee of a company, typically you have to watch these like hours and hours of modules on cyber safety. Don't click on links. How do you avoid spam and hackers and phishing and all these other things? And that's fine, but they're sort of like ticking a box. Most people try to fast forward through them. They don't have a ton of impact. But those individuals have to behave differently if you want to lower your cyber risk. And right now, cyber insurers don't really have a way to deal with that. So Cybercade is working on something, or actually, I think they already have it, that helps teach people and also assesses the level of risk that like they might get phished. They might leave their laptop behind. They might, fall for a scam. And that could inform how their cyber insurance responds, how it prices them, what kind of actions need to be taken, what kind of precautions or training or whatever. That's not something we've ever been able to see. I came from the cyber insurance world myself, and you can like look at the networks and the equipment and the software that people are using and see like how risky or dangerous it is, or did they configure it in ways that make them more exposed, their firewalls and whatever else. That's fine, but you can never really get behind like what are the actual individual employees likely to do? Are they going to fall for that email scam? I'm the CEO of an organization. Within like 2 months of me joining, my employees started to get texts from like me, someone claiming to be me, asking them to go buy gift cards, which is like, why would I ask you to buy a gift card at 9 at night? Like that doesn't make any sense. But some of them were texting back and like, oh, I'm just a soccer game with my kids. I'll get. It's like, okay, you just gave them more information on you that they can use against you later. You didn't buy the gift cards, that's great, but it took you like 10 messages back and forth with this fake person to realize you were getting scammed. That's not great. So, good teaching moment for us internally. But what if we could know that ahead of time? What if we could have done more to help those people who were more likely, more susceptible to do the wrong thing, to behave differently, instead of just like making everyone watch the same videos that have an effect on some people, but not others, because it's just not the way their brain works. They don't get it. Having a better tool to engage with that would be game changing. I've seen enough like hacking and breaches to know that it always boils down to some individual. It's not usually like the tech itself wasn't good enough. That happens, but generally it's that someone screwed up somewhere, and that's what allowed the person to get in. So really cool idea. I think Cybercade, that could have a lot of potential for the insurance industry, which would be awesome. Because that means, again, like if you solve a problem the insurance industry is facing, it means the world can move forward with the things that it's trying to do. Like we stand behind everything that happens. So it's not just like so insurers can make more money or be viable or whatever. It's actually, you're talking about facilitating everything that goes on in the world on a daily basis. And I think that's pretty cool. Um, Jim, I feel like I've rambled on long enough. I don't know if there's questions or thoughts or people disagree completely. Like any of
All right.
that is
Is this
fine.
working? Does this work? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, first of all, this got a really smart guy here. You're hearing some really interesting things. He's um he's probably someone who knows more about like innovation and how that's gonna like translate from finance to insurance and technology. So Bryan, let me ask a question on behalf of the audience here, okay? So most of you are what, sophomores or so, pretty much? Finance students. So imagine you back in that day. You're a finance major, University of Iowa, and you're thinking about like, should I explore more? Because a lot of our Vaughan Institute, about 94% are actually finance majors that then
Yeah.
go over and get an RMI certificate, which is kind of an easier path because they've already got a lot of the credits. Why should I do that though? Why bother getting into this industry? I'm in finance already.
Yeah.
What's so great about being in insurance?
So I was an econ major, not finance, but I feel like it's at least somewhat close. Um, I think that back to the earlier point I made, is like there's problems in the world for sure. There's a lot of things that need solving. If you understand finance, that's the basic mechanism by which these things work. So are you interested in just, kind of working through numbers and the dollars of it, or do you want to figure out how to use those particular things, that the way the money works behind the scenes, the capital that's being deployed and the way it's being used, but to use that to facilitate something much bigger. And that's what I think the ultimate draw of insurance is. One of the things I talk about a bit is ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And insurers invest a ton of money. So there's, how they use their capital can have a big impact on ESG, but a way bigger way they influence ESG is what they choose to insure and don't insure. Like that's about how you use capital and finance to affect world level change. I think that's really fascinating. And then there's so much possibility because it's an industry, a lot of the finance world in general is like this, but it's an industry that is behind on figuring out the tougher things that are right now really rearing their head. So it's kind of a prime moment. If you like tackling tough problems, it's a prime moment to come into it.
Awesome. All right. I know there's one brave soul out here who might want to ask a question. I'll ask it for you. What is there something you're kind of curious about? How about this? All right, I'll just ask this one on their behalf. So you went down the path of being in claims, right? And then you translated that skill to some other skills, right? And then you learned like I can make a difference. I'm going to do more in the innovation space. So did you know what you're going to do when you were getting right out of school, and like how did you end up, right? What's your
No,
story?
yeah, I mean, like I said, I wanted to be a consultant. I wanted to because I like to solve problems. I like to fix things. And that's what I was gunning for. And what I found when I was in insurance was like there's a lot of things that could be better. There's a lot of opportunity to make an impact. And I ended up kind of getting hooked on it. And I left my job at Liberty Mutual to go get my master's. And I had this like vision. I'm a car nut. And so I was like, I'm going to get into cars and do like product strategy and that'll be awesome. And it probably would have been, but I really got pulled back into insurance and I didn't intend for it, but I just found myself drawn there. And once you're in it, you're in it. And from there, like I just the train left. Like I was on a number of really cool projects when I was at McKinsey. And when I left McKinsey, it was for this British company that was just setting up in the US. And so it was like, I mean, I remember kind of like I couldn't wait to get up and get to the office in the morning. And I had a coworker, we were in this like temporary space. We were just setting up. There weren't enough desks. And I had a coworker who had just moved from the UK and his internal clock was still on British time. So he was up super early and we were like fighting to see who would get in first because we shared a desk. So whoever got in first actually got a chair and we were both like hungry to do the work. But I loved it. Like it was so exciting. And I don't think anyone imagines that when they think of insurance. But it really can be. And in that point, like it was too late for me. I was too far down the road and I can't imagine doing anything else.
Hey, would you mind going to the slide back to where we're about to wrap up here, Brian? But one of the things I wanted to like remind you all is you can reach out to the two of us. So I'm the new executive director of the Vaughan Institute. I'm here to help you if you're interested in pursuing anything like this. It's a very hot space. I think that's a good example right there. Camille is the assistant director. She's the one that actually is the chief operating officer that makes everything work. And what I would promise you is if any of you have an interest in learning more about Bryan Falchuk and you'd like to read an amazing book he has, if you'll reach out to her, I'll buy the book for you. Okay. And I would highly encourage you, go back to his QR codes if you would. Highly encourage you to check out this podcast because it's very addictive once you start going down this path. You get this little soundbite of about 10 minutes long, really cool stuff, make you think different about everything you do. So, Brian, I just want to say on behalf of the University of Iowa, can you flip back to the screen there? We just want to give you a big Hawkeye thank you. So please give it up for Bryan Falchuk.
Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, my friend. See you.